Welcome back, everybody. David Griscom here with Left Reckoning. We're really excited. Matt and I are just, coming back from our trip to Los Angeles, California. We had a really wonderful time. Thanks everyone who showed up. And we wanted to take the opportunity to speak with somebody who actually made an appearance at the show in Los Angeles and who's running for office in California for California Assembly District 65, Fatima Iqbal-Zubair. Thank you so much for joining us today on Left Reckoning.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Well, we got a lot of stuff to get into. So let's dive in. I mean, just briefly up front, could you introduce yourself a little bit to the audience? What your background is and what really made you feel like you needed to throw your hat in this ring to run for office.
Yeah. I think for me, honestly, the first thing I think about, not just saying this because it's a left show, but it was the Bernie Sanders movement. I think,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, him running in 2016, I think even in his first run inspired a lot of us to even be like, what is government supposed to do for me? What is the role of special interest, right? We didn't know this person right before, but I think he started the dialogue, and it shows that even when he didn't win, I mean, look how many the countless races he's inspiring, and the just the just sort of the movement he's inspired. But the other part of it was that kind of intersected with me working in Watts, and so I
Mm-hmm.
really saw the things he talked about. Is this sound okay? Because I can tell my staff to like
Oh,
speak.
it's fine. It's
Okay, I
fine.
want to make sure because I don't think they know I'm on a podcast. Okay,
It's
but
lively. I mean, it's a humming
okay, you're an
campaign.
active like bumbling campaign office. Okay, good.
Yeah.
That's okay, good. I just want to make sure. So working in Watts as a teacher really brought a lot of those issues like to head, right? Talking about class inequity, talking about racial disparities, talking about redlining,
Mm-hmm.
over policing, environmental injustice. I saw all of it sort of, in Watts. And a lot of it, we know the educational inequity. We know that the system is made to suppress folks, right? In schooling, in housing, in everything. But when you experience it, it's really like it makes you angry, especially when you fall in love with the community that you're working in. Um, but it was seeing a lot of those, inequities, but then also seeing that, in California, in the richest state, in LA, one of the richest cities, we have lead pipes, we have contaminated water, which we have at our school. We have, lead levels that are way higher than the EPA says is healthy happening here in LA in so many communities. I mean, that's what led me to organize. And just long story short, I was actually appointed commissioner, funny story, by my current opponent to try to sort of make a change, to be one of the community leaders. Actually, I don't think he wanted to think I was in it to make a change, but pretty soon after saw that he was basically in the pockets of big oil, of speculators and developers, of the police, and that's what his voting record showed. And I mean, I think that's the story of why the outside inside and the inside outside game is so important, because these folks that have a lot of power have the power to either destroy your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And have you fight for even survival in your communities, or they have the power to build systems to help you thrive and succeed. And I think that's what led me to run. Is I want to be the latter. Like I want to be part of the movement that's helping folks not just survive but also thrive.
Yeah, I mean, LA, I think people who aren't familiar with it, they might have a certain opinion of what the politics are like there, but there's a real need for people who want to be more rooted in like working class politics, and particularly things about workers' rights and affordability. I mean, could you give folks a sense of like what the district is like that you're running in, and also what it is that you're running on that is going to be motivating people to show up and vote for you?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, especially with GeoTV. Now, that's something I definitely am trying to pitch every single day. Yeah, so basically, you know, for us, at the doors, what we're telling people and the vision that we're providing. Let me start with like something as simple as housing, which is,
Hmm.
should I believe be decommodified and be a human right and not be based on, market, and whether you can afford, right, a home. It should be a right. And this is not just a thing, right, Dave? We can actually decommodify housing. For example, a bill that I support is social housing at the state level. Assemblymember Alex Lee, the one Democratic Socialist right elected there, introduced the bill. It obviously got killed, I believe, in the Senate committees, but it's because we don't have enough corporate free
Hmm.
progressives out there who believe in this vision of decommodifying housing. So, for example, social housing, right, which is actually on one of our mailers to, because we're presenting ourselves as a candidate who will lead on transformative solutions to housing is one thing that's not really being actively pursued by enough legislators at the state level. And what that would really do is say basically establish housing as a human right. One thing we have to know in our state of California is that we pay the most of not just any state but any nation on housing,
Hmm.
whether it's in rent or mortgage. And typically it's 50%, people are making 50-60% of their paycheck. It's definitely over a third, is the average, which is ridiculous. With social housing, you can pay less than 10%, right, of your
Hmm.
income, and all of that other income is spent on your family, on honestly, on yourself, on vacations if you want to, on your other needs. And that's the way it should be, right? This life shouldn't be about living paycheck to paycheck. It should be about who has the wealth and where is the wealth. How do we redistribute it so that our government can provide housing as a right, can provide education as a right. And I just talked about one example, but we can decommodify a lot of the things right now in our society that aren't. And another example of that is healthcare, right?
Hmm.
Healthcare right now is also a commodity and a privilege to have. In my district, particularly, there's places where about 30% don't have access to healthcare, even under Medi-Cal and even under the expanded Medi-Cal that California passed. We don't need health for all, like Governor Houston is touting, and it passed. That's great. It's an expansion, but it's still leaving people out. It's leaving too many out. So, single payer healthcare is something that we need, and it would guarantee healthcare as a right. And I say this because my opponent and a lot of corporate folks say these are pie in the sky ideas, but they're actually not. There's actually policy plans to get there. There's ways to pay for it. And we're not just folks that are spouting, hashtags. There's actual pathways to get there. And part of the reason so many of us that believe in this want to run and want to win is that we can't wait to do the work to actually
Hmm.
get us to a society and to a state where folks can actually thrive.
Uh, like just on staying on the healthcare for just a second. I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of models and plans for how we can achieve it. And California is in a
Mhm.
position, being like a larger state that there are pushes for a state level Medicare for all system. Is that something that you're pushing for, or do you think that we need to be fighting on the federal level to make that happen?
No, 100%. Not that I'm fighting for it, if I'm pushing for it. I was doing it. I'm a current, delegate in the party on the executive board. I'm on the board of the Progressive Caucus. I even had meetings with my opponent, my role as delegate, brought him constituents, wanted him to vote yes on it. I lived in the first province, Saskatchewan in Canada,
Hmm.
that had universal health care. That's how Canada did it, and I believe that's how we need to do it in the U.S. Ro Khanna, who just endorsed us, talked about it. He said this is going to be much easier to achieve on a state by state basis because of the federal waiver, right?
Hmm.
That Newsom can ask Biden will pay for, I believe, almost a third of it, and then the rest of it we need to pay, by taxing the very wealthy, right, or by reallocating our budget to away from prisons and things that are honestly wasteful spending and into rights like healthcare and housing. So I'm a big proponent of passing it at the state level. I would be like a lead co-author on it if I was up there. I mean, on the outside now, I've been pushing for it, pushing my opponent, pushing others. I know DSALA also did an active effort in my district to get the
Hmm.
word out. It unfortunately didn't work because my opponent takes so much money from big pharma, so much money from the private insurance industry, and it is really a pay-to-play system. And it's sad, honestly, Dave, because healthcare inequities affect people of color the most, the folks that are lower income the most, and that is our district, you know. And so he would be honestly really lauded and really liked if he in my district if he supported it. So it just tells me that he's really in the pockets and he really likes those kickbacks or likes whatever he's getting from it, or the next position or the leadership position or what have you, more than people in his district, more than he even wants his constituents to respect him. And that to me, I don't know, it's kind of out of this world. It doesn't make sense, but
No, I mean it is always amazing sometimes when you see the slam dunks that are missed
right.
by some established members of the Democratic Party. Um, but I mean, before we get on, this is like a very broad question. But you said something earlier that sort of struck me when you're talking about social housing and people being able to spend money not only on just things like feeding themselves, but also maybe going on a vacation. And I like that a lot because oftentimes, particularly in the
Mhm.
Democratic Party, whenever we talk about social programs, there's a punitive aspect to it
Right.
as well, right? Where it's like, oh, you can't, yeah, this it has to be very austere, and we've got to make sure that nobody's going to be getting something that is going to be improving their lives in the sense of like just being able to have more leisure. And like, if you could, expand on that a little bit and maybe talk about like, what your vision is, for like a more just future than the one that we have right now, and the one that is even put up by, I think, a lot of people who we're friendly with, but on the progressive side, who, there's a lot of caveats sometimes attached to these programs.
Yeah. I, I don't believe in like, I feel like the role of government should be to get to that stage. To give you the short answer, I'll expand on what that means. It should be to be able to, not just make sure folks can survive, which is, I think, what we're doing now. In fact, we're trying to pass policies to help people, maybe barely get there, or even if
Hmm.
they would get there and survive and be able to have a home and have healthcare. I don't think that's the way we should be looking at government. It should be what essential rights should a human being have simply for being human, right?
Hmm.
Um, and and part of that, yes, is like, as human beings, like we should have, expendable income, right? To spend on things. And right now in our society, like in our current government, at least in America, we don't. We see the model applied in Europe and stuff like that. When you see the happiest countries, I mean, not that I believe everything, but when you see that, it's in, and you see those countries and who they are, right? And at least what
Hmm.
type of governments they have. It's countries that provide universal childcare, right? They sometimes have a 4-day work week. They have parental leave. They have healthcare as a right. College is free or almost free. They have social housing. I mean, so like that's the way it should be. And I think the irony is that like we have the most money in the state of any other state, and our country, the U.S., has the most money of any other country. Yet we are stealing from the working class and bringing that money to the very wealthy. So it's an extremely immoral, inhumane system,
Hmm.
and I know a lot of that changed when, like after the 70s, when we saw corporations lobbying and
Hmm.
giving their money to politicians, right? When we saw Reagan, right? Lower taxes on the wealthy, right? These were tangible data points and things that happened, and we saw the working class, really struggle. We saw the middle class shrink. We saw homelessness increase. So we need
Hmm.
to get back, right, to a government where we are taxing the wealthy, right, at a really high rate, right? The top 1% of the 1%, where we are honestly overturning Citizens United. But even on a state level, we can limit foreign contributions. We can get public financing of elections. There are things we can do to root out these corrupt influences. And I know that when we do, um, we will have that sort of vision. And it's not going to, happen overnight. It's not. But and that's why when I as a teacher, I'm very humbled when people are inspired by our race, right? But I
Hmm.
always say it's not just going to be me alone. We need
Hmm.
folks at every level of government. We need more folks in the state legislature, and that's why one of the policies that I talk about, that's even beyond housing and environmental justice. I have a policy on my website called "People Over Profits," right? And it's really talking about the underlying issue of money in politics, of in California, how we can still expand the right to vote. For example, I believe we should expand the right to vote for undocumented residents in local elections, for those in prison. I believe that young people should be able to vote in school board elections and other local elections, things like that. There are things that we could do to really make sure people have the power over corporate profits. And that I think is essential to getting, a lot of these issues like housing, healthcare, education as human rights.
Well, talking about corporate power, I mean, um, I think people might not know the kind of power that the oil industry has in Los Angeles. And
Mhm.
if you could talk about that a little bit, and I mean, like, I know when we talk about climate, we're talking about a lot of different things, but if you could talk a little bit about the oil industry there, and what you're running on the environmental side. I mean, California really is, just similar to Texas right now, I think, in a major struggle. One, with climate change, and then two, with making sure that we have electric systems that are able to provide people with power and don't blow up, and all these kind of things. And I think it's really important for us as a movement to be cognizant of the responsibility that we're going to have potentially coming into power to manage these systems so they're working better for working people. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so 100%. And one thing, honestly, Texas did better than us is they had a buffer zone between drilling and sensitive areas before California did. We just passed that this year. So I want people to start with that because honestly, California, with the resources we have, should have done so much more for
Mhm.
a just transition than they are doing. Um, but yeah, it's so important. I mean, part of the reason I even decided to run against a big oil Democrat and not wait till the seat was open in 2026 is because we're already behind on acting on climate change, on environmental justice.
Mhm.
And we need to transition sooner. A conversation I think that's important to have is that like we passed some great bills this time, like the buffer zone bill, but our state agencies got really low scores in terms of implementing. So I'm concerned that will this be implemented at the municipal local level? And I think that's the pressure too that like, I would apply as an assembly person that my opponent might not won't apply, right? Because it's in the
Mhm.
pockets of big oil. So I think that's important too, to do the hard work after bills are passed to make sure things get implemented. But yeah, California is definitely in the pockets of big oil. I mean, in so many ways. I mean, as a delegate, you were fighting to get the private side of the party to stop taking oil money and to not endorse anyone who takes oil money because it is so influential. The top three donors at the state level are real estate, big oil, and police, right? So it's
Mhm.
one of the top contributors to pockets of Democrats. And just we simply have to stop that first of all. We have to. I think once we say the party's not going to endorse people that take this money,
Mhm.
that is the root of the issue because we have a lot of great bills introduced by great climate organizations and progressives up there, but they just don't always pass and they're not implemented if they do pass. So I think that's the root of it. What we need to do more of is I believe in like also other solutions besides looking at just transition for oil. Yes, we need to do that and
Mhm.
build a green new economy, but also looking at public transit, right? Looking at how we plan our cities, looking at our infrastructure. I mean, if you look at South LA, folks that come to canvas down to our district say there's like no bike lanes, like there's no really public transit or way that kind of stops at a certain point when you go to low income communities. That's also related to the pollution, right? When you have more cars and freeways around certain communities, that's really bad. And so I think we need to look at this from a transit perspective too.
Mhm.
Um, which is really, really important. I think this is also a housing issue, right? I mean, when we think about are we building housing really planning it near to where people are working and living, where kids go to school, or are we causing people to have these long commutes, so they're, having to be on the freeway, right, for long sort of periods of time and that too. And then the other thing is, honestly, the biggest contributor, is a military industrial complex, right? So we got to look at
Mhm.
how much we're, funding our wars because that's also, bad and contributing to climate change. So we have to honestly put that much effort that we put in the military industrial complex and transfer that energy and all the innovation to solving climate change. Like there just needs to be a fundamental shift in our government where our focus is. And
Mhm.
it, and obviously, look, is it better with a Democratic presidency and Newsom as opposed to a Republican governor? Yes, but honestly, we are still in a downward spiral unless we act with much more urgency.
Yeah. I mean, you won't get any arguments from me on that. I mean, so there's a lot of issues that we're just unfortunately not gonna be able to get to. People should be sure to check out Fatima's website, fatimafораssembly.com. We'll have links below. But in the last couple of minutes, I did want to talk about something that's important to us here on Left Reckoning, and that's the role between you yourself as a candidate and this larger movement, and most particularly the DSA. So
Mhm.
I want to ask you two questions up top. What your relationship is with the DSA, and do you consider yourself to be a democratic socialist?
Yes. So I'll answer the second one first. So yes, I
Hmm.
do consider myself to be a democratic socialist. And second, my relationship with DSA is, our campaign is endorsed by them, by the
Hmm.
national and the LA branch, and we're really proud of that endorsement. I think it's a powerful space for class solidarity, for rate, class solidarity. Let me start there. There has been some criticism with, the amount of like, black folks and people of color, kind of in
Hmm.
DSA, but like I was kind of telling you before we started the interview, Dave, I think we have to be productive in those discussions. So something I'm doing is that I'm part of the South Central DSA branch is kind of underdeveloped right now. So I'm gonna take on like some of the membership activation role and stuff like that. And that I think is productive, right? Like,
Hmm.
so yes, we can acknowledge the ways organizations have to grow, but that does not mean the organization is not still powerful and important and needed, right? Especially when we have so much crises, right, in our
Hmm.
communities and right now. We need places where people can organize. And, like, I mean, honestly, the vast majority of DSA members are great people and they're doing great work and they're doing it for the right reasons. And so I think we need to focus on that and focus on also like productive ways that we can improve an organization, any
Hmm.
organization, right? Whether it's a campaign like mine, whether it's DSA, whether it's Sunrise, whether it's even organizations in my district can always improve, right? Um, but it's our job to be productive and not sort of do something to get more Twitter followers or likes or take advantage of a situation and not grow an organization in an unproductive way because that doesn't grow an organization. A lot of the folks that want to help should have conversations with DSA leadership, with me, with anyone, and we can come up with plans moving forward together, right? So yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to say on that. I'm happy to answer any follow up questions as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, it's just one of those things where at the end of the day, like having the deep rootedness and the representation across, working class communities in this country is like, well, that's what winning looks like. And we're in a point right now where we're trying to build and we want to get there, but there's a way of acknowledging where we're not hitting our marks like we'd like to.
Yeah.
And then there's being demobilizing, right? And I think there's a big difference between people who
Hmm.
criticize these organizations sort of with the intention to get people to drop out and to not participate versus people who are saying, hey, here's some issues. Let's try to do something
Yeah.
about it.
I mean,
Um,
one thing I'll say real quick is that, I
mhm,
mean, we saw the movement DSA's been able to have in New York. I think the New York
yeah.
State Legislature has much more Democratic Socialists than we do. Their city council, I think, is getting packed with folks that are Democratic Socialists. And it's not about just that title or that label. It's because these folks are passing transformative policies. And when you build a
Hmm.
majority, you're able to really have real class solidarity and really get these policies passed. And I think that is what we should focus on and remember the value of having an organization that's doing the work and putting boots on the ground. It's important.
I definitely agree. Well, everyone, we have links below for ways that you could check out the website, potentially get involved. Is there anything that you might want to direct our listeners to be checking out who might live in the area and might want to get involved or make
Yeah,
sure that they're showing up to
yeah,
vote and all that?
yeah. The main thing is, let me just talk about. I didn't talk about in this interview where my district, boundaries are. So the
Hmm.
main thing is like vote. Ballots are out right now, right? So our district runs from Watts all the way down to San Pedro, parts of San Pedro, east to Carson, and then west to the Harbor Gateway and like West Carson area. So if you live anywhere within those boundaries or in those cities, please, yeah, vote before November 8th. It's so easy because you get a ballot in your mailbox. And I always tell people also, they like knock LA, DSA LA. There's great guides because especially for young people, it's
Hmm.
kind of um, the ballot's overwhelming. It's still overwhelming for me, and I'm like an older millennial, right? So it's like I can understand. And the largest voting block in many districts, I'm sure not just mine, is younger people actually. So get out and vote. Either whether you're in my district or not, just make sure you turn in the ballot and you vote. And I know our campaign and a lot of progressive campaigns have been sharing voter guides to make it easy for you on our social media. So my social media is like Fatima 4 Assembly. On Twitter, it's the number four. On Instagram, the word four. And the other ways to get involved on my website, sign up to Canvas and phone bank. You can do it on my website. You go to the Get Involved page and donate. If you have grassroots dollars, anywhere from $1, $2, $3 to 100, it doesn't matter. Whatever you can do, please support because we want to maintain our momentum with our field program, especially, and we can only do that if we raise the money. So please support if you can.
Well, I really do appreciate you coming on. It was great being able to meet you in person last weekend. And yeah, thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.